All right, I'm all standing in front of lunch at this point, so I want to thank you all for joining me for the noon slot here. My name is Calvin Hendryx-Parker. I am co-founder and CTO of 6 Feet Up. We are a Python and AI consulting agency that loves solving hard problems. The harder the better, and the more fun the better for us. And today I'm going to be talking about a super exciting topic, which is compliance. Who loves GRC? Governance, regulatory compliance. Yeah, there's a lot. Look at the compliance fans are in the house. They are like, holy cow, this is amazing. But we're going to talk specifically about IAM, so identity and access management. These are things that rarely happen. They're rarely dramatic at first, but as they quietly build up, it becomes a really big fun fire later. So if we want to talk about how this can be avoided, we're going to talk about IAM because IAM is your access control layer. This is the thing that helps separate folks from doing the wrong things from folks who should be doing the right things at the right times. I think more importantly, like unlike firewall rules, which we call security groups now, you don't just set these once and forget them. Sometimes firewall rules are easy because there's a whole set of allowed ports. They all go to these places, and generally those don't move a lot. IAM, though, roles get created for one-time projects, emergency access. Keys get issued and forgotten. Like somebody needed something real quick, and so someone did it on the side, and poof, you've now forgotten that this thing actually exists and happened. So permissions can creep wider over time because you just gradually add this, gradually add that, gradually add this piece as you start getting into this really fine-grained identity space. So this drift is what we're going to try and talk about today. Oh, hold on. There we go. Thing's not on. Bingo. Because this is literally a challenge everyone faces today. The organizations are running across multiple cloud providers. I'm not going to dream up that AWS is the only solution in town. People who are using GCP, Azure, you name some cloud, all of them have some kind of IAM solution to satisfy this need because access is obviously important. We have to be able to scale this out. It's not that teams never think about IAM, it's that the cloud computing environments are changing very rapidly. Each cloud provider gives us all kinds of different tools to do this. So again, if it's hard to do, we don't typically do it often or well. Like if it's easy to do, we'll keep it up to date, and it should just work and flow. We want to make sure that the IAM drift is basically what happens is that gap between intended access, like what you expect to happen, and then actual access over time. Projects end, people move. Like I mentioned before, emergency access and exceptions become permanent, and point-in-time audits, which is what people typically do today to address this level of problem, miss what changes the next day. You literally get just 1 point in that time. It's kind of like health. If you did a blood test today and you only do it once a year, you don't have any idea what happens every other literally second of the day in your body throughout the life cycle of how you're living. And cloud environments are really, really similar in that they are very much alive and living and very much mutating all the time. So we want to talk again about 4 common areas here. So if we wanted to start with this, we should try and baseline where the low-hanging fruit is and the easiest ones to start implementing this process with. Once you start implementing the process, it'll become like an exercise, like a muscle. You'll start getting that repetitive nature to it, and you'll be like, oh, we'll just add this in there now, and add that in there now, and add this in there. And the way I like to approach this is with a tool that can help me accomplish this across potentially multiple providers and platforms. So what I'm talking about is not AWS specific. Actually, I'm going to show some examples that work in GCP and Azure and some other platforms, although it was originally written for the AWS platform. So many of the real niceties of this tool, the Cloud Custodian, have been targeted toward Amazon and the AWS platform itself. It is a vendor neutral and open source platform itself. There's no licensing fees to use it. There are enterprise providers out there who can give you support and build extras around the edges for Cloud Custodian. But Cloud Custodian itself is a project I get really excited about because it's compliance, right? Who doesn't get excited about compliance? But it has, again, each of these clouds have their own native APIs and different native tools. Custodian is a layer that sits on top of that and helps to try and take away some of that complexity from it. So if you actually just sat in Jeff's talk over next door, he went over some kind of 101 basics about how to use Custodian. This is the dive deeper. We're going to take Custodian and do X, Y, and Z with it around IAM and drift detection. So the 4 kind of easy ones here is, we want to be able to classify and get rid of things that are in kind of 4 main failure modes of like compromise risk, forgotten attack paths, excessive blast radius, and compliance evidence. So if we look for things like users without MFA, can we make sure we close that door on a potential path into our systems by automatically detecting this when it happens, reporting on it, and then doing something about it. Orphaned identities, again, those are the big open doors. Like this is something I don't think a lot of people think about. If you're in a large enough organization and they have a Calvin at 6 feet up email address assigned to me, I leave, another Calvin joins 2 years later, that person now has inherited my permissions and roles if they never cleaned up my old account in all the systems that existed everywhere else. So it's a good use case for never repeating people's email addresses in environments, but it still doesn't negate the fact that you should be cleaning up what has happened in the past so that someone doesn't unintentionally get a role they were expected to have. And we'll talk about how to mitigate that as well. So the account compromise. So if we looked at, for example, the MFA problem, if in the Cloud Custodian world, if I want to look for users inside of my system that are active and don't have an MFA existing, this is the total policy you would need to be able to report on that data. And you could run it as a cron job, put it in some kind of orchestration platform, any way you want to run it. Cloud Custodian actually doesn't care. I'll show some more opinionated ways that actually Custodian can run in response to things. But at its basics, you can actually just create a policy with a name, looking for a specific IAM user or a resource called IAM user. And this is the AWS version of the policy. And so it knows under the covers in the libraries how to go perform that action for you. And in this case, we're looking for a filter. We're saying, I want to find only users that don't have MFA active. And that's it. You'll get a report. You run this against the Custodian command, against your environment logged in. You'll get a report of however many users don't have MFA enabled. And now you can go do something about it. Still point in time, but it's the first step towards being able to do this across multiple platforms, because I can now write the same policy with very little change to go against Azure and GCP and on and on. Actually, let's look at an Azure example here. In this case, we're looking for using auth methods filter. So Azure uses their Microsoft Graph API. That's the default support in Custodian as opposed to Azure RM, the other kind of way of doing things. So the policies will look a little different because of how you have to interact with Azure. This is more of a consequence of Microsoft as opposed to Custodian. I'm sorry, but that's just kind of what you got. If you like AWS, this is much cleaner and I like it too. But yeah, here we're looking for these authenticator methods that might be missing on specific users. Again, you run this once, you get a list of users who aren't compliant. You can now go fix your infrastructure to require that. But at least you know where the problems will exist inside the system. Yeah, they expose Azure and AWS look different because of the graph versus like the APIs underlying of it, but the policy pattern itself is the same, which is what's important here. So this is the old attack vector of like roles that should have been deleted but are still sitting around. So if you have deleted users who had roles but didn't delete the roles that they had, and now you got orphaned roles, you could add users potentially and have those roles get picked up inadvertently. In this case, we're looking for resource IAM roles, looking for whether they're used, or actually in this case not used. So the type of being used but state being false says they're not used. And you're seeing now an example of some remediation. We can actually, in one command or one run of Custodian against this policy, delete those unused roles right off the bat. Be careful here, because you want to make sure you establish trust with these systems before you start having it do automatic actions for you. But that's actually the complete policy to clean up unused IAM roles in an AWS system using Custodian. GCP kind of relative similar or a relatively similar type of operation. In this case, looking for old service account keys. And this one has the remediation action, again, of delete. Here we're looking for any key that's been in the system for 90 days and looking for that and deleting it. Again, being very careful with these kinds of tools. Remediation, this is what remediation can look like, but you're going to want to establish the trust, earn trust in these policies and these tools. The nice part is you can run them without the actions on them and get reports that you can now start collecting into your own spreadsheets, databases, tables, infrastructure, inventory systems to help start sorting through where the problems are before you unleash these tools in kind of full automatic mode. Now we want to look at reducing the blast radius of a compromised role. These are overreaching examples, like roles, for example, that shouldn't exist in your system. People who have gone through and because something wasn't working, kind of played the old change mod 777 game and gave it more permissions than it was supposed to have just so you could get it to work and then forgotten about it. In this case, you've gone through and you've gone in and said some service star, allow all on that role. I think all of us have done this. But this looks for that having happened in your environment and now can allow you to do something about it. So it can find basically any filter that has allow all available to it. The Azure RBAC example of that is if Azure folks in the room too, I assume there's a couple, but if you understand like the Azure subscription system, like basically there's owner, and if you put the owner too high of a level, or really owner shouldn't be used in this case. They should be very more fine-grained around that. So this one's looking for too broad of an owner assignment, basically being at the scope of a subscription level. So we're looking at the various tiered levels of access inside of these environments and saying specifically, I want to make sure there are no users with a role owner at the subscription level, because it's kind of like a IAM user, which shouldn't exist. And then we want to prevent audit failures and penalties. If you've gone through, has anyone ever gone through a like CIS or NIST audit or doing like a SOC 2 analysis? Great, you did it once, right? And you got all the spreadsheet boxes checked, and it was awesome. Well, here we can actually make sure that they stay. So in this case, we're looking at a very specific CIS benchmark for Microsoft Azure Foundations, and you can even see to the fact that it's got to a very specific version and a subversion of a standard, or in this case, it's a benchmark. Actually, if there's one thing you all come away from today in this talk, is the difference between a security benchmark and a control objective. The terms get thrown out a lot around compliance and these kinds of tools. Benchmarks are running specifically against specific environments. This is a benchmark against Azure. It has probably a higher level control objective. You can think of control objectives as things that should happen across all of our environments. All files should be encrypted at rest would be a control objective. The benchmark would be S3 buckets must have encryption turned on for objects inside those buckets. So in this case, we've got the text, the comment here is the benchmark text basically in plain English. And a lot of times we have to take that plain English and convert it into what we can actually do or check or action on. So building out Entra ID authorization policy, looking for users who have the role to create apps. In this case, we actually want to make sure that administrators and appropriately delegated users have the ability to register apps. So if this list is empty, you have a problem. So it's kind of the inverse of the previous ones, where we get a report and there's users in it. We want to do something about those users. In this case, we've got a problem that there's no one who can create applications inside of our Entra registry or directory. And we can ensure, again, from day to day and time to time, that this specific benchmark always stays true. This next one is a control objective. This is a NIST SP 853 specific control objective around the limit of number of login attempts before you lock a user out of a system. So don't let them just bang on the door repeatedly. After 10 times, that user would get potentially locked out or some other action would happen. So you can see we've got the Azure Entra ID organization work here. This has been put back into the open source work. This is some work we did to actually extend Cloud Custodian to support some of this compliance and GRC governance work to make it possible to write policies like this in the open for your teams to use. So you can basically set a threshold, maximum 10 times. The point here is not whether you pass a CIS or a NIST audit or review and get the check mark on the box. The point is you want these controls to stay and persist and be reported on when something goes sideways. One concern to detect, for example, if we're looking for like a first step into this process that would give you a lot of kind of bang for the buck, is going to be taking something like this, looking for old access keys. And this is a little more in-depth example where we're showing using, again, Jeff mentioned how everyone loves writing YAML in his talk. But in YAML, we can specify some variables and reuse these filters, for example, and notification types down in the policy to simplify them. So we can actually kind of eliminate a lot of the repeating yourself and to be a little more dry with the templates. In this case, we actually are going to notify. So we've got an age filter looking for those keys that are older than 90 days. But now we can actually notify a specific security team via SQS that these things are happening. So there's an action happening as opposed to just like printing out a report. And then we just use those variables down here in our policy, which is detect old access keys with that filter and that action. Pretty, again, straightforward and easy to use. But if we want to take this to the next level, we want to evolve this. It's like pick that one concern, for example, and deploy this into production. Dissect it consistently so that we detect it consistently so we earn that level of trust. This is that next step in maturity of rolling this out and making it work for you. Going into notification, tuning, and then eventually we want to add in action after the signal has been trusted. And when we add in action, we'll also want to add in auto remediation. So I'll show that up here next. This is the specifying action. So remove keys, for example, as a remediation action. This is not an automated action just yet. We're still running this policy looking for old filters after 90 days, notifying and doing an action simultaneously. So this is both going at once. I think the one everyone's really excited to see is probably the last one here, which is automating this whole remediation. How do I make this so it's hands off and the thing can just run without me having to be in the middle of compliance and regulation and all those pieces, which is the leveraging Cloud Custodian's auto remediation features. Once you've gotten that level of trust, the notifications have been working, now you know how to perform the remediation. We need to look for signals in the system where we can detect when this drift would happen. In this case, we can use the CloudTrail type, which is a mode that Cloud Custodian can now run in. When you specify this CloudTrail type on here, Custodian automatically install, and this is AWS specific, but it will work in other platforms as well. They have kind of parallel parodies with this. That'll install Lambda into AWS that now watches for this specific event that you're putting in here, which is the create access key. This watches for any time someone creates an access key. If these filters match, you can actually have it do the action based on the filters. So anytime it sees access keys, it can now look for old keys, seeing if they're being rotated correctly, and actually take that action on your behalf and keeping you automatically in compliance. So kind of a self-healing, if you're using the fun enterprise terms, like a bit of a self-healing environment here. So once that happens, and you can log it, send it to the SQS keys, notifications, do the removals, etc., all without having to think much about it. So in summary here, I like Cloud Custodian because it is vendor neutral, it is open source, you can make it what you want it to be, you can extend it further by getting commercial offerings if you needed to. It's not required though, at all. But you want to make sure you close that path, close this with a mature model inside your organization. Go through the detection, notify, tune, remediate, and then into automate steps through the process. If you try and skip a step in there, you're going to stub your toe and it'll hurt. It'll take longer for you to get into the automate part of this. Make sure you're using maintaining this compliance piece, if it's again easy, we will all do it. And if it's hard, it'll all drift and we'll have a bad day somewhere later down the line. Maybe you're not working there anymore. It's not your problem anymore, but it probably might be, and then it'll suck. So thank you all for coming out and hanging out with me. I know IAM is always the hot topic everyone loves to talk about, but I do think that Cloud Custodian is actually a great solution to this kind of a problem. And luckily you can use it on other cloud platforms too. So thank you all. If you have any questions, happy to take those. We got 3 minutes or so.